Transmitting to you from Old Heart Radio.
I'm recording now. My God.
Okay.
My God. I don't know if you can tell over this Zoom medium, but I recently shaved, and
Yeah, you look good.
my mustache is a little more tame than it has been in the last handful of fucking weeks. I've let it go lately. I was like combing it out, and I had mustache hairs that were touching my bottom lip from me. When I was I'd leave my mouth open and I had a couple danglers all the way down. I was like, this is disgusting. How does anybody want to make out with me? I don't know how my fiance stands me.
Yeah. No, you look good. So.
I appreciate it. Sometimes, you just got to get that confidence boost, which is why you're presumably listening to. I don't know. That was a bad segue. This is an episode of the Whack Arnold Brothers, as always. But we're doing one of our little fun little kind of breaks from the standard episode. We wanted to start digging into the 90s, mainly because, and we're going to be breaking it up like Fitz, you mentioned on the last episode. Mainly because there's a lot to juggle when it comes to the 90s, man. There's so many movies, and there's I feel like we do this every time, but I was just so surprised when I started looking at 1990, for instance, and was oh my God, dude, all these fucking movies came out in just this year alone. I was like, holy shit. It's going to be hard to sift through, because I try to get some from every year, but
right.
It's hard to slim them down sometimes.
1990s is definitely a little heavy,
Yeah.
There's just too much good stuff to pass up.
Yeah. And just right off of that, I just wanted let's jump into my first pick then, because it is a 1990 home run, if you ask me. It's Arachnophobia, starring Jeff Daniels. I feel like everybody forgets that it stars Jeff Daniels, but they always focus on John Goodman.
Because his character is more, he's the exterminator. He's kind of the more memorable character, I guess you could say. But it's when I haven't seen this movie in a long time, but when you picked it, I was looking at it again. I was like, holy fuck! Like you mentioned, I totally forgot that Jeff Daniels was in this movie. And this is one of those movies that I always really wanted to watch when I was young. But my sister is one of those people that just is deathly afraid of and absolutely hates spiders. So she never, anytime we go to the movie store, I'd be like, I want to watch this, and she'd be like, no.
Nah. I mean, for good reason. Okay, so in hindsight, this movie has some pretty cheesy-esque effects to it, the spider still creeps me out, but I have issues with spiders. I wouldn't say I have arachnophobia necessarily, but especially when I was younger, spiders just fucked with me, dude. I was so I would get paralyzed with fear at times if if I was taking a deuce in the bathroom and one comes crawling out of nowhere, and you're just oh my God, I'm frozen here. I can't fucking move. That thing's gonna come at me. I don't know. And I mean, as an adult, I've gotten to the point where, and I don't know if this is good or not. I mean, spiders are good for a lot of things. I try to leave them alone when they're outside. But as an adult, if I see one in the house, I'm like, you're in my fucking territory, squat.
I feel like the only spider, and which is weird to think about this, because when I was a kid, I used to see daddy long legs all the time. And my parents were like, hey, leave those alone, because they'll take care of mosquitoes. Yeah. I haven't seen a daddy long legs in forever, but that's the only kind of spider that I would let go.
Yeah. Yeah, you pass. But no, Arachnophobia though, man, like this movie has some classic moments. We mentioned John Goodman's character, exterminator character. I just remember like the opening of it gave me such creeps, like because like it's like there's this whole like sequence where they're like these people are in the jungle and they're trying to like capture some spiders or something, to study, and they like, I don't know, create this like sound wave that like rustles all the trees, and then all of a sudden these spiders just start falling from the fucking trees. I was like, that's a goddamn nightmare, man. Like walking through the fucking like jungle or the forest or whatever, and all of a sudden like hundreds of spiders just start falling off the branches or on the no. But I do have to admit, like this shameless story, this movie freaked me out so much because it's all, like I said, it's all about spiders taking over, essentially taking over a fucking house and then a town, really. Like they take it. But anyway, so I was so terrified that after I watched this movie, that the night I fucking watched this movie, I couldn't sleep. Like I was so afraid that like some gigantic spider was gonna fucking get me, that I went, and this is like distinctly, I remember so distinctly doing this. I went into the bathroom in the middle of the night and I shut the door. I checked all the fucking corners along the floor. And then I put a towel like along the edge of the door, like, where the crack is on the edge of the door, so nothing could get in. And then I slept in the bathroom on the floor in the secure room, because I was like, I can secure this room.
Oh my God.
Like it was that bad that this movie fucking got me. And then I watch it nowadays and I'm like, it's just a funny horror movie, really.
It really is, because it's just like it's so funny how this spider essentially like hitches a ride from Venezuela to California, just mates with like a house spider, just creates this fucking army of spiders. It's like, what?
Yeah, I would almost put this now, like nowadays, I would put this in the same category. Like do a double feature of Arachnophobia and Eight-Legged Freaks. Boom. Okay. You know what I mean? Eight-Legged Freaks is definitely leans harder into some of the comedy for sure, but
totally, because they're a little more. That movie has some
David Arquette's in it.
I love David Arquette.
Same.
But yeah, I think that like Arachnophobia is one of those movies where, as I mentioned in the case of my sister, where if that's one of your fears, I could see that movie really having an impact on someone. And then in a similar vein, and we'll get to this later when we talk about it, but like people that are afraid of clowns, like that's going to be a movie that traumatizes them. So
absolutely.
But I feel like, what were you going to say?
Oh no, go for it.
I feel like I haven't seen Arachnophobia in such a long time that it'd be a fun one to revisit, because it does have a lot of good elements where it has the comedic elements to outweigh, it's just one of those movies that takes such a small concept and creates something creepy out of it. And it's sometimes you don't need, like a Michael Myers or, some wild concept to really nail home.
Well, no. And we've seen with other things. And I think this was one of the movies that kind of had like a bit of a trace of influence from The Birds, where it's like like you can take these things that we're around all the time, these animals that we take for granted, some that we're around sometimes, and just like make a movie about what the fuck would happen if they turn on you. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, that's the creature,
yeah.
But yeah, that's apparently alleged. So I was just reading that on the Wikipedia page for Arachnophobia. I was reading that there was an announcement made on June 2nd, actually recently, that they're going to be doing a remake of this movie, which seems unnecessary, but James Wan is co-producing it. So, I mean,
Yeah, I'll watch anything with his name attached to it. So
For sure. That's definitely, you know, it's like, well, all right, I'm in for whatever they're throwing at us there.
I'm gonna give me one. I'm gonna take my shirt off really quick. 1 second.
Ooh la la. Listeners, if only you could see that if only this wasn't just an audio format.
Yeah, but interesting. I wonder, It's just
it seems like a weird movie to make a remake out of. Honestly.
Well, because it's like if anytime they remake something, it's like, are they going to hit a lot of the same beats that the original made, or is there going to be something completely different where they didn't even need to attach the name to it and they could have made some, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I agree. It's like sometimes they do it and they're like, it's like they're literally just trying to use, I don't know, like the popularity that the original name has with it, but they completely make a different movie. Anyway, I do recommend that people check it out if they just want to like a good time. Though I think it's a fucking fun movie.
And something you mentioned about using a name, like an established name for, like, that makes me want to segue into the first shout out. And the only reason I didn't pick this as a choice is because I know at some point we're going to eventually talk about this movie, because it's literally one of the movies that instantly come to mind, you know, when we created this, is Troll 2.
Oh God, yeah.
And it's such a ridiculous movie because the directors of it called it Troll 2 because there's a late 80s horror movie directed by John Carl Buchler called Troll, and they rather than coming up with their own name, they felt like it'd be more powerful if they had a previous name attached to it. But the most hilarious thing about it is that there's not a single troll in Troll 2. They're goblins.
Yeah, it's all fucking goblins, dude. It's so wacky. I mean, it's such a fun movie that it's like, it's amazing. It's one of those movies that has like a huge cult following now, where like, you know, like somebody will rent out a theater to screen it and like they'll make a big deal about it. Like, it's amazing. I mean, it involves going to a town called Nilbog, which is just like, I mean, it's all so it's so ridiculous. But you're right. Like, that's so funny that they just use the name. Like, I don't know. It's so weird. Yeah. It's so weird. But it is one of those like prime examples of that, though. Like, that's for sure. But it's like, oh my God, it's such a fucking funny movie, though. Yeah. We'll get to it at some point, because it's one of those movies like I would always suggest to people, be like, this is one of my favorites, so bad it's good. You know, it's iconic. Yeah, it's 100%. So a couple quick shout outs before I jump into my first pick. In 90, we have two Frank Henenlotter. We have Basket Case 2, and then Frankenhooker, which is just such an outrageous fucking movie. Oh my God. Sorry, there's a motorcycle driving by.
What, a motorcycle? Are motorcycles like your like if a dog sees a cat, it gets distracted by it? Is that your?
No, well, I just couldn't tell. Like, it just like revved its engine really loud. Oh, I don't know if it was bleeding through. In case you didn't know, listeners, I'm recording outside of the cafe I work at, because we still don't have internet at my house. Updates will come. Will continue to come as needed.
Outrageous. It's outrageous.
Like, I tagged my Coffee and Contemplation video on Instagram, which you can find at Old Heart Radio, by the way, shameless plug. Fuck CenturyLink. So anyway, back to your original programming.
They don't have good customer service, it sounds like.
They don't.
Anyway.
They don't. They treat us like dogs. Anyway, what were you shouting out?
I shouted out two Frank Henenlotter movies, Basket Case 2 and Frankenhooker. Frankenhooker is just such a ridiculous. movie.
I've never watched it. I've seen it on Shudder.
You should watch it, dude.
I might need
It's
to.
just one of those like movies where it doesn't need to have this like crazy rich like in-depth plot. It's just this you just gotta watch it. It's wild.
It's just it is what it is.
There's this insane scene where a hotel room full of hookers take some bad they're smoking some bad meth, and this like this wild scene happens where they start having this like adverse reaction to it, and it's just wild. You just have to see it.
Oh man, like I said, I feel like it's been on Shudder forever, so maybe I need to. There's also, like we've covered a couple of movies from here, like Death by Temptation, which was a surprise in itself.
Yes, it was.
Got to shout out Jacob's Ladder with Tim Robbins in it. Like that movie. That movie's weird. So it's like it's like if it like follows Tim Robbins plays like a Vietnam vet who's like having like PTSD and like hallucinations that kind of spiral out of control and shit. But it's a really like interesting movie overall. I feel like, but
it's one of those mind fuck movies.
Definitely.
Where you're like what's real, what's not. A couple of months ago, I was hanging out with a coworker, and she was watching. It was like a remake of it, and it was fucking awful. And I was just like, "You should probably just go watch the original."
No need to remake that movie at this right now. Yeah, watch the original. Another that I had to shout out was Predator 2. It's technically listed. It's like I feel like the Predator and the Alien movies, as after they launched, they started becoming more sci-fi and almost sci-fi action. But it's also got the horror addendum. You still see some spine rippage. But Predator 2 is such a fucking ridiculous movie. Everybody hates on it, but I think it's a fucking great movie, dude. Like Danny Glover, top notch in it. Like. There's some
Gary Busey.
There's some. Oh my god, yeah. Busey, the beautiful Buse. And the last one I wanted to shout out is just because I don't think we weren't going to talk about it in too much in depth. Was Tremors. 1990 launched the still going, if I'm correct, Tremors movie line. Like which is insane if you think about that.
It just has such like a cult following.
It's wild.
And the Kevin Bacon original was such a cool, unique concept, and the grabbers are awesome.
Oh god, yeah, dude. I mean, it really was. I remember the first time I watched it. It was like a fucking fun, like cool movie. And like, you have these montages in almost all of them where at some point they kind of get the hang of like blowing up some tremors. And so they're like, it's Jesus. Like, it's fun. It's ridiculous. The monster work, the effects work on the tremors were really awesome on the grabbers, like you said. But
some good practical effects.
But what else we got from 1990?
90s, real quick before I jump into my first pick, I just wanted to shout out two. So we also covered Shakma. Which,
Shakma, dude.
If you just want to watch a baboon run around like a wild man, it's amazing.
You want to watch a baboon maul somebody, like chef's kiss. You can't get better.
Yeah, and then we also, we covered Maniac Cop recently, but Maniac Cop 2 came out in 1990.
I can't remember how many Maniac Cop movies they ended up making, but
there's 3 of them.
There's just 3 of them? Okay.
Yeah. But the first movie I want to talk about at length is one of my favorite sequels, is Child's Play 2.
Ooh, yes.
Which, it's just one of the... What's that?
I was looking at the cover. Sorry, Jack. Chucky's
back. That's an iconic cover where it's the he's got like the fucking like hedge trimmers, and there's the Jack in the Box. It's such an iconic cover,
dude.
But it's just such a good movie because it's following up. It's 2 years after the events of the first film, and the good guys corporation feels like it's time to bring it's this whatever the thing with Andy Barclay blew over, so they're gonna bring Chucky back.
Because Chucky's was a wildly popular thing, and so they're like desperate to get the image back or whatever.
Yeah, they need that good guy's money.
They need that good guy money.
And the first death scene in this movie is awesome, where they're putting Chucky back together, and it gets to the last part where they're going to put his eyeballs in, and the machine like a wild electricity bolt comes out of nowhere and sends this guy flying through a fucking plate glass window. It's so amazing.
Yeah, zapped. Oh my god.
And at this point, we learn that Andy's mom, she's not in the picture. She's in a psychiatric hospital because she, claims, that the doll was real and that everything that her son said was real. So, he goes into a foster home with a couple called Phil and Joanne. And Joanne is played by Jenny Agutter, who's an American Werewolf in London. That's probably what she's most known for. She's the nurse.
Yeah.
But Chucky 2, it just a good sequel. And I was going to mention this when it came time to talk about Gremlins 2, is that a good sequel, takes everything that from the formula that made the first movie good and just builds on it. And this movie has some great death scenes. It has a great catchphrases too.
Dude.
For instance, when he kills Phil and he's hanging upside down from the stairs in the basement, he's just like, "How's it hanging, Phil?" It's just such a fucking good line.
Dude, well, I feel like we've talked a bit about it before, but Chucky's like Freddy, Michael, all these others. He's a fucking like horror icon.
Oh yeah.
But it's almost like they took, elements of how Freddy Krueger was kind of crass and how his humor is, and they just ramped it the hell up with Chucky. You know what I mean? Chucky's constantly just mouthing off and just coming up with these awesome one-liners, and he has a really distinct voice, Chucky voice, that just,
oh yeah. I can't replicate it, but yeah,
I can't either. But it's as soon as you hear it, you're just the image is Chucky, in your mind. But he also has another one of my favorite. Anytime I used to watch this movie, I would just be almost in tears laughing. Where, and now, it's a very sexist line, but there's this scene near the end of the movie where him and Kyle are en route to. It happens right before the big climax, which I'll talk about in a second. But Kyle's driving to the orphanage where Andy is back at, and Chucky's on the hood of the car she's driving, and he's like, "God damn women drivers." That's what I mean, though. It's it's a combination of whatever the line is, the voice actor, as well as I don't know, just the timing was always just so perfect with his delivery,
And just the fact it's a goddamn doll.
Yeah, and that's it. It's at the end of all of it, it's still just a fucking doll. That's one of the greatest things. Because in these movies, you keep thinking well, okay, I could just kick him. I could just, I could just do whatever. But then, the fun is that it never seems to happen that way. And Chucky always just seems to come up with the next outrageous way of fucking just killing somebody off,
And part of that has to do with so many characters in the Child's Play franchise. It's a doll. it's not real, you know? And
Yeah.
so it gets to the point where he's been unassuming for so long that these characters don't actually believe that he's real until it's too late. You know what I mean? Until he's walking, talking, and stalking, and then you're fucking toast. But you know, because Child's Play 2 came out in 90, and Child's Play 3 came out in 92, and you know, Child's Play 3 doesn't get as much love as I think it deserves. I think it's
yeah.
But this one has probably the best climax, the best ending sequence at the fucking Good Guys factory. It's just so menacing. Just you know, not only is there the awesome scene where Chucky's hand gets caught in the grate and he fucking rips it off and puts a blade in it.
Oh yeah, that's right.
But just like how much he goes through before he finally dies, because he has that gnarly part where he gets brought backwards into part of the machinery and gets like all these different parts attached to him.
Yeah, dude.
The molten, and then just getting blown up at the end. But there's before this whole sequence starts, like one of the first things that happens at the toy factory is one of the coolest deaths of all time is when there's like the unassuming security guard, and he gets put onto one of the manufacturing lines and gets like the doll eyes lowered into his eyes. Fucking, it's so amazing.
It's Chucky 2's one I feel like I need to like rewatch again. I watched it like not that long ago, but like it's exactly that. Like some of those, there's just some creative like cringy deaths. Cause like, could you imagine that? Like,
no. Just like
that would be one of my worst, like my worst way, like personal worst ways to die is like somebody like, you know, like plunging something like in deep enough into my eyes to like squish them and like, you know, mangle my fucking face like that.
Yeah, because it would like be the last thing you would see.
Exactly. Like literally the last thing you see is the thing that's gonna fucking kill you. Like, not cool. Not cool.
But yeah, I mean, I'm a huge advocate. It's one of my favorite franchises. I love every single movie, even Seed of Chucky, which is my least favorite. There's still parts about it that I enjoy. I'm just really looking forward to season 2 of Chucky and seeing where they continue to go with that.
That's what I was gonna say was that, like, you know, we've mentioned it before, but the Chucky show is actually really cool, and I definitely am like excited to see that they're picking, you know, another season's on the way and everything.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to take the opportunity to jump off of that sequel and let's go into another sequel that I've set aside.
Yeah.
We can't talk about 1990 horror movies without talking about Gremlins 2, the new batch. Mm-hmm. So I think in the last time we talked about Gremlins, just at like whatever random episode, you know, we kind of mentioned how like at times it becomes really self-aware. And like that's like Gremlins 2 is like it took that note from the first one and it runs with it. Like it is such a self-aware movie. Like one of my favorite things is just the fact that, you know, a lot of the times when it comes to sequels, it's like not the original director, and just the fact that Joe Dante continued this and just made it even more bonkers is amazing. Yeah, dude, and that's what I mean. Like it like Joe Dante is just a fucking gem. Like, yeah. And yeah, I think it really, that this sequel really benefited from not having that necessarily like that change in vision. Mm-hmm. But like, it gets ramped up to so hard. And correct me if I'm wrong, listeners, but before you get into what you were going to say, I'm pretty sure there's like a story behind it where they wanted to make a Gremlins 2 and Joe Dante originally didn't want to do it. I think it had something to do with he was allowed like a certain level of creative control, and that's why he agreed to come back and do it. I could be wrong, but I think that's part of it, because it's so many. I think it's like 6 years after the first one. I think you're right. Like at least I'm looking on the Wikipedia page and it says it's talking about like in the production section, it mentions that like after the financial like success of the first movie, Warner Brothers wanted Dante to do a sequel like right away, and he declined. And it mentions like in this piece, it just says like, you know, the original film seemed to be like a really taxing experience on Dante, so he didn't want to do it again. And then, you know, I guess maybe some things shifted around. It also mentions that apparently storylines that were like maybe going to be included in this, like included either like Las Vegas, or apparently somebody tried to pitch like Gremlins on Mars.
Oh God!
So glad that didn't happen. But,
no, because this movie has the perfect setting.
It's Manhattan, where it's like, you know, like Manhattan's like just like like we've talked about like Jason in Manhattan. There was another one we talked about where somebody goes to Manhattan, but it's like this like mecca, horror mecca. It's like the Avengers all like, and Spider-Man and Daredevil and Luke Cage and all those fuckers live in New York. Like all the horror icons just end up in Manhattan at some point.
Yeah, it's better than space.
It's better, yeah, fair enough. But yeah, so either way, like this movie just gets bigger and crazier, and you know, there's some great, you know, like deaths, like electrocution deaths, and you know, there's like
just all the different types of gremlins.
Yeah, that was really like one of the things that I really like. That was like the thing I probably loved the most about this movie, was just the fact that like they just made each gremlin have a personality, man. Like each gremlin was a different gremlin, and I think that was one of the things I kind of like always liked about both of these movies. You know, is that like they didn't just make everything so generic that it was like, oh, it's just a monster, now it's crawling on things and then you kill it.
Totally.
You know, in this one you got, you know, like you know, Gizmo's back, which is like the world's cutest fucking,
oh yeah,
you know, little like non-Furby, I guess. But yeah, it all takes place in like a television production like building in Manhattan, I believe, for the most part.
It's just this giant building that has all kinds of different shit in it. It has labs, places to eat, you know, and then like you mentioned, all these different. There's like a cooking station, and there's a horror channel. There's like all these different. Yeah. So it's a really great setting, but yeah, just there's like the spider gremlin, there's the winged gremlin, there's like the really smart gremlin,
the brain,
the female gremlin. So it's just really, like I mentioned, it's essential. It's just like Gremlins on steroids, where they just had all these totally wild ideas, and I feel like all of it worked. But I will say this. I'm glad they stopped it here and didn't make another one, because it's like I don't know really where you could go from there.
Well, and that's it. I think like Joe Dante was pretty smart. Like not only maybe was it like a, you know, hard like experience trying to corral all these special effects and all these puppets and everything, as well as the getting everybody to act, you know, with them and interact with them on set. But I imagine he probably was just really self-aware of the fact that like, we don't need to keep dragging this out. Like this is not, I don't know, because it's a fun couple movies, but like it would be really quickly like stale, you know what I mean? If you just kept doing like, okay, and now the gremlins are in this setting, and now the gremlins are in this setting, you know? But yeah, either way though, like it, you know, 1990s staple, like you definitely want to watch both of them. I wouldn't say if you know, it's just one of those, if you liked the first one, like you might as well follow up with the second one, because it's even more fun. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We also 90s also has a lot of 1990 also has a bunch of sequels. We got Exorcist 3.
Oh yeah.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. Puppet Master 2. Psycho 4. We also have Silent Night, Deadly Night 4, which as I mentioned before, has Bill Moseley with a or no, that's the third one. Sorry. Initiation is wild though. It's another one of those movies that has a lot of Clint Howard in it. And it's just a wild movie. There's also Slumber Party Massacre 3 and Sorority House Massacre 2. So there's a shitload of sequels in 90. And I didn't realize until just now, like how many like picks we made that were Stephen King related, whether they were adaptations or something that he wrote. Yeah. But a movie that came out in the 90s that we didn't pick, but I wanted to shout out was Graveyard Shift, which is a really good adaptation of a short story about a textile mill that gets overrun by giant rats and then this giant bat creature, which looks really good on screen. There's some good special effects. And then 90s, we also have Ghost.
What's Ghost?
Like Patrick Swayze.
oh God, dude, that's like, no. Oh my God, that is listed in the horror section. That is not by any means a horror movie.
No.
Oh, but it is one of the most romantic movies of the decade.
Oh my God. But so the next one I wanted to talk about that is actually a horror movie, and I'm a really, it's if we've had any longtime viewers, they know that I'm a sucker for a good anthology movie.
Oh yeah.
So I had to pick Tales from the Dark Side, the movie, for many reasons. It's got such a great cast. It's got Christian Slater, Steve Buscemi, James Remar, Julianne Moore, and then not only that, but in the wraparound sections, it's got a really young Matthew Lawrence and then Debbie Harry, who's playing this role of a witch. And that's the plot device, is that this witch has this, and it's not like a witch in the sense, for anyone that hasn't seen it, it's not a witch in the sense where she's got a black hat on, but no, she's just like a housewife that has this kid kidnapped and is preparing to cook him, and he tries to stall her by getting her to tell stories. So it's a really good,
it's a clever
segment.
Yeah, it's a really clever idea. Like, really quick though, you mentioned Matt, features a young Matt Lawrence. Is that from the Lawrence brothers?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah, like Joey, Matt, and whatever the other one was.
They were so popular in the 90s, bro. They were everywhere.
It was insane. Like I don't know like why they weren't really like anything special. You know what? It was like the fucking Hanson effect. Like all of a sudden, like everybody was like, oh my God, these brothers are in a band. That's so fucking cool. And everybody's like, oh my God, these fucking Lawrence boys, they all act. That's so fucking cool. Like,
well, I think it's because
they weren't good.
Here's the thing, and this might just be me throwing out a wild concept, but it might have like been one of those things, and I could be getting this wrong. They could have came before the popularity of the Olsen sisters, but I feel like that might have been a thing where
the Olsen sisters definitely took the whole sibling like thing, like siblings doing the same thing into like a different stratosphere.
Totally.
Yeah, that's a good point. I wonder when the first like solo Olsen movie came out. You know what I mean?
Sometime in the 90s, because
they were doing like they were on fucking Full House, like as like the little baby forever, and that's how they got like popular. Really, which is so weird to think about. Like they got popular because they were really funny babies or a small toddler or whatever the fuck age they were. Anyway, we whatever, fuck it. But anyway, so Tales from the Dark Side.
Yeah, so it's got three very different stories. One of them is, the first one is adapted from an Arthur Conan Doyle story. And this one has Steve Buscemi, Christian Slater, and Julianne Moore, where it focuses on this graduate student who is roommates with Christian Slater's character, and his character is related to Julianne Moore, and she steals this like artifact and plants it in Steve Buscemi's character's room, and so he gets blamed for it, and they're going to kick him out of school because they were both going for the same scholarship. So Buscemi's character ends up resurrecting this fucking mummy, and it's such great practical effects, and just like sends this mummy to do his bidding to dispatch these two that hatch this nefarious plan against him.
Yeah, dude. Like it's pretty cool. Like it just because, like you said, like the special effects on. Oh my God. So like I mentioned earlier, I'm sitting outside the cafe I work at, right? We close at 4 o'clock. Some assholes just walked in at 3:59.
You gotta love it.
You gotta love it. Anyway, back to normal. So you're right though. Like the special effects on that mummy are really cool. And I was actually thinking about mummies earlier today, which is super funny to me. Like that we're talking about this now because like mummies are really like I always loved them as like horror characters, as like creature characters. Like they're just they're tattered, they're dead, like these reanimated corpses. Like I don't know, it's just I think
because do they have a mind of their own?
Yeah, like what is driving them? Like anyway,
that's one of my favorite, and this is. It's not even it's a kid's horror movie, but one of my favorite things that is mummy related is early 90s early 90s Disney Channel movie, Under Wraps.
Under Wraps, dude. I knew exactly. As soon as you said Disney Channel, I was like, Under Wraps. Yeah, boy. Dude, there's a whole not that they're really like great movies, but there's like a whole string of like low-key like Disney Channel quote unquote horror or like scary movies. And other ones like it's about like what's under your bed or whatever. Like I can't remember what the fuck it's called. But anyway, Under Wraps is legit. But there's another good one, like Mom's Got a Date with a Vampire. That was a good one. Oh yeah. Oh dude. Anyway, that I think that's a really solid segment. I really like the second one in there, the one centered around the cat, Cat from Hell. It's just like that classic. Well, not classic, but it's like it's really kind of like cool because it sets up as like I don't know. It's just like a mystery right away. Like this rich guy hires a fucking dude to kill a cat. And you're just like, okay. Like there's what's the ruse here? Yeah. But along the way, what you find out is that basically this cat, like, okay, so this dude is like a piece of shit. Go figure. He's killed like 5,000 cats to like while testing out this new drug or whatever. Pharmaceuticals. And anyway, so basically, like what you kind of find out is that this cat is sort of like the entity that is here to like get revenge on him for all of that like senseless death, and so it's really fucking cool if you ask me. It's this gnarly little bit, and like reading about it right here, this is the one that's like George Romero adapted from a Stephen King short story, I guess. Like I kind of forgot about that, but that's super cool. Like,
and they had worked together. They had worked together on Creepshow, so they have a very good. And what's another interesting thing about this is that this is supposed to be in Creepshow 2, but it was cut due to budget issues, which is pretty interesting.
Oh, whoa, okay, yeah. I mean that makes sense, but like I'm glad that they like found a home for it. You know what I mean? Because I think it's a really great segment.
So it's just the way it like ends too, with the cat jumping down the fucking hitman's throat.
It's gnarly. It's so wild. Like when you first watch that, you're just like, what the fuck, dude? Yeah, it's
yeah, because it's
Yeah.
like you said, because it's like, who would need to hire a hitman for a cat? You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
cool. Yeah, it just leaves you like immediately like scratching your head, being like, what's the deal here? Like, what is this
Yeah.
mystery I'm about to get into?
Yeah,
Yeah,
They're all
Tim
pretty
Sweeney.
they're all pretty strong segments. It's hard to pick a favorite, but I think that the third one is probably my favorite idea, where it has to do with this struggling artist played by James Remar that one night happens to see this gargoyle creature brutally kill someone.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right.
And this gargoyle creature basically signs a pact with him that he'll let him live if he never speaks about what he saw. And pretty quick after that, he ends up meeting this lady who, they hit it off. They get into a relationship, and soon all these things start going his way. His floundering art career picks up. He's really successful. They get married and have a couple of kids, and it jumps to like 10 years later. And he makes the fatal error of telling his wife about this story, and just the twist fucking ending is so good.
Dude, and like that's man, like what gets me about this is that like it's one of those, this happens, I feel like this happens in life sometimes, where you're just sort of like, you do something and then enough time goes by that you just fucking forgot. And when you bring it up, you don't, or like you think about it again, you don't necessarily like, I don't know. It's like, yeah, it comes out almost as like a slip or something. Like it's like
Totally.
weird, like, oh yeah. But like something like that, where it's like, you got like your life at stake. Like having like this, like random, like, like this time, I forgot about this time that like this happened. Then you're just like, fuck. Oh my God. What? Oh my God. Now I'm fucked. But it's not just him that gets screwed over, if I'm correct in the ending.
Right. Cause we learn that, his wife is actually this gargoyle. And has this amazing scene where not only her, but the kids transform, and he like literally everything that he loved, he loses. He ends up dying, and then it just has this great shot at the end where they form gargoyle statues like on top of a church. It's just a really strong segment for me. And then it obviously goes back to, and just as I mentioned, I love anthology movies, but I love an anthology movie that not only has strong segments, but has a strong wraparound segment, because the movie ends with the going back to the wraparound segment, and the young Lawrence boy, getting the final laugh and knocking the witch into the oven that she was going to cook him in, you know what I mean? And just, prevailing basically. So it's just a strong movie. And one that it's one of those movies that I find myself watching a lot. Anytime I see it on any streaming site, I'm like, oh yeah, here we go.
It's always a, I don't know. It's like it's never a bad thing to put on. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Yeah, that's, it's like that. And, we've talked about Creepshow also. Like those are both just really, really solid, like piece of stuff. Kind of like you said, it's like, it's just, just pop it on. You can re-enjoy them over and over and over.
Absolutely. It's also one of those where I feel like anytime I watch it, I come away like with a new favorite segment. I don't know. It's weird, but yeah, it's a classic.
Well, kind of furthering our drive into the 90s. This is what I mean, where it was like 1990 alone had just so much going on that, we invoked his name during this, the mention of the last movie. So we're going to dive into a Stephen King related piece of work, Misery.
Yeah.
Misery is a fucking wild movie, man. Like this isn't a movie you don't expect to come from somebody like Rob Reiner,
my God.
You know what I mean?
Dude,
like
his filmography is so wild. Spinal Tap, Princess Bride, A Few Good Men, and then two of my favorite Stephen King adaptations ever are Stand By Me and Misery. It's just, yeah,
that's what I mean, dude. It's like, I don't know. The dude's all over the place. But Misery, oh my God, like what a nightmare of a movie. Nothing can be like said. You can't say enough about Kathy Bates' performance in this movie.
Dude.
She like that. She alone
she is more frightening than some monsters you see in a horror movie. Like, dude, her performance is like, if you were to like, let's say, if there was like a college course about horror, like she would be one of those examples that you would look at as an iconic horror performance.
Oh, absolutely. It's just like her. I don't know. It's how she can like come off as, no matter what she does, if she's trying to be pleasant or if she's like being aggressive, she comes off as calm and like it's this weird vibe, where it's like at any moment throughout the entire movie. So you follow James Caan's character. You're probably familiar with it, listeners, but he gets in a terrible car crash, ends up in the care of Annie, played by Kathy Bates, who somehow cannot get outside help. So he's all she's got. And at any given time throughout this whole entire movie, you're just on the edge of your seat.
Oh my
thinking
God. Yeah.
Something bad is going to happen. When is it going to happen? And then like throughout the movie, you just get more and more nervous. You get more and more anxiety. And then, we've got to talk about it. Sorry.
I know what you're gonna talk about but real quick, you talk about where all these things happen, like, and leading up to this scene that you're talking about is just one of the most like nerve-inducing or anxiety-inducing scenes in the movie is where she leaves to get him the paper, and he starts milling about her house. Finds this sketchbook and learns that she may or may not have been responsible for all these child's deaths, but there was not enough evidence. And as he's going back to his room, he accidentally leaves this little statue in the wrong. But you do not expect, unless you read the book, because it's one of the most faithful adaptations. But dude, this next scene.
Well, it's just like, it's like that alone, like the idea that like, the one small missing piece, or one small piece was out of place. And that's what fucking screws you. Because it follows directly into this scene that is one of the most like gnarly scenes still to watch. Like,
absolutely.
Where, Annie, again, very calmly, like sets up, well, it's actually really fucked up. So like James Caan's character, Paul, wakes up and is like strapped to the bed basically. And Annie very calmly puts a fucking plank of wood in between his leg, in between his ankles, and takes a sledgehammer and just smashes his ankles. And like the first one's bad. The first one's terrible. And it's like, you hear the sound and she's calmly explaining how they would do this to, Chinese men who worked on the railroad and tried to run away and shit like that. And you're just like, this is fucked up. And then you see, I think it's the second one, maybe you see both of them, I can't remember exactly, but the visual of the sledgehammer just destroying that ankle. It just turns it to fucking jelly, and it's one of the best pieces of like, you know, special effects, like practical effects in any horror movie because of how effective it is, if you ask me. You know?
I was literally just going to say that, having watched horror my whole entire life, it is still one of those scenes that has stuck to me for how fucking gnarly and how effective and how realistic and how brutal it is.
Yeah.
It's
intense,
gnarly,
and just
I could not imagine that fucking pain, dude. It's gnarly.
Yeah.
Cause her whole like motivation is that she's upset that she's like super obsessed with the series of his about the character named Misery, and how, you know, because it establishes early in the movie that he wants to move on from the Misery series and become a more serious author. So he kills off Misery in his book, and she is so set off by it that she burns his manuscript. And while he's there, and while she's taking care of him, and she makes him remember that no one knows he's here, but she forces him to write Misery's Return. It's amazing.
And then, like, you know, this like slow power struggle between them the entire movie is just, like I said, it's just nerve-wracking. It leaves you on an edge. Oh, I love it.
And just the and the climactic fight too is just so, it's just so great, you know. And to further that, because, you know, they get in this battle, you know, he ends up smashing her face in. But it ends on this really good note where it's established that it's like sometime later he's walking with the cane, and it goes to show just the psychological effects that have happened to him since this, because he's at like a business luncheon and thinks that he sees her. It's great.
Yeah, exactly. It just has this lingering, lasting effect, you know.
It's one of the most faithful adaptations, and it's like, and, you know, King has such a diverse you know, range of work, from fantastical elements to turning everyday items into something sinister, to shape-shifting killers, to just to have one where it's just a normal human being as one of his most evil creations is amazing.
That's what I mean. Like, it's again one of those, like, I don't know, it's just like one of those things where you don't assume how fucking evil and intentional this person is, and it just reminds you that people are like that. It's fucking crazy.
Yeah,
people can be like that. Excuse me, not everybody's like that. 100% great movie. You know, and the performances hold up. So yeah, that's another one of those movies that if they ever remade it, I would just be fucking pissed, because it's a perfect movie in my opinion. Yeah. But
jumping to another King movie, because I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about this, because 1990's It is one of those movies that for so many people, for basically a generation, created this massive fear of clowns. And for me, shortly around the time my mom passed away, it was the first Stephen King novel I read. So I have like a personal connection with it. However, it was one of those movies where, and I've told the story about my like traumatic experience with The Toxic Avenger. My parents were pretty cool with letting me watch like pretty much whatever, but for some reason they would never let me watch or never let me rent it. They were just always like, dude, this movie's going to fucking terrorize you.
Yeah. I mean, same with my folks. Like, I remember because the cover was always like, it was, you know, like the cover was Tim Curry, you know, Pennywise. Mm-hmm. And it was always so like tantalizing. You were just like, what is this? Like, you know, I want to watch this. But yeah, you're just like, your parents just knew something you didn't about this movie. You know what I mean?
And that Tim Curry performance is still one of the all-time horror performances.
Oh
And
my
it's
god!
it's wild to me because, you know, this wasn't a theatrical movie. It was a two-part
made for TV.
TV mini. Yeah. And he is so menacing. And just, I think he perfectly encapsulates what, when King created the character Pennywise and put him to paper, like what he encapsulated with who this person was.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite things about it, and it's a huge fucking book, but one of my favorite things is just the concept of this creature that's been around for ages and ages that can take the whatever form is your like wildest fear. It's just so good.
Yeah, that's one of the fun things about Pennywise, really, like, is that it can at any time this entity can change to like be specific to you, you know. And yeah, like the sort of idea that this entity has been resurfacing for, I don't know, hundreds, thousands of years, however fucking long, you know. I think it's like 100. I think they like there's like a recorded time like the line,
Totally.
I think in the story, like when they first, you know, it was first experienced, you know, but like who knows how long it'd been there. But it's like, it's supposedly, isn't it? It's like this entity that's like crashed onto Earth or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And anyway, so like this, but yeah, this like you said earlier, it inspired like a whole, like pretty much a whole generation of people like that are now like trepidatious and almost, and you know, like fearful of clowns no matter what.
Yeah,
you know,
totally.
I think people fear Tim Curry's Pennywise the Clown more than they like remember and fear John Wayne Gacy, like, you know, in a
possibly,
you know, in a way where it's like, you know, in the psyche, you think about killer clowns, people probably think about Tim Curry's Pennywise first, when there were real fucking killer clowns out there.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and like, but yeah, you know, like no joke, like absolutely, like we just talked about Kathy Bates, you know, like Tim Curry like was given this opportunity and then gave us all this iconic undying performance. Bill Skarsgård did a great job as Pennywise in the new movie.
I was actually just going to ask like what your opinion was on the newer adaptation, and
I liked him just fine. Like I think that, like, you know, I think that at times he tried to emulate Tim Curry a little too much, which ended up, I mean, there's a lot of original content that came out of it.
Totally.
But the problem with redoing a character in a story like that is when you have a performance that's so heavily related to that actor, to like, you know, somebody like Tim Curry, it's hard to like take the mannerisms that he brought to it and, you know,
true,
bring them to something else, because it's not necessarily part of the character that was written, but it's something that actor brought to the performance. And I think so, because Curry's was a little more comedic at times, where Skarsgård was definitely super menacing. So it's like hard to pick which one. Obviously I'm more of a Curry fan, but it's kind of close because I loved Chapter 2. Not so much, but I absolutely love Chapter 1. I think it's a really faithful adaptation. I think what they did with Pennywise is gonna, like, for this generation was what it was for ours, because there's just that scene where he pops out of the fridge and he's all contorted. Oh yeah,
like there's some gnarly imagery in that movie. It's an iconic, like, Stephen King, you know, he's rightfully in the place that he is because he's created so many unsettling, iconic characters, and probably none more popular than Pennywise. Even so much as they're coming up with like a prequel series right now for HBO Max, which sounds pretty interesting.
I'd be intrigued by that, because like we were just talking about, like it's kind of one of the things that I think that you know could be fleshed out is the idea that this creature has had a history on Earth, you know. Yeah, that's cool. I'm into that.
So before we, I feel like we don't need to talk about it for that long because most people are very familiar with it. But so we mentioned that we were kind of more heavily. A lot of our picks were in the 90s, and you have one pick in 91, and But before I want to just do a couple two more shout outs for 1990. We obviously are going to miss some, but 1990 gave us Tom Savini's remake of Night of the Living Dead, which I feel like doesn't get the love it deserves. I know it's one of the, the original is such an iconic movie that I feel like no matter how it was remade, that there would have been a certain amount of disdain towards it. But I think that Savini, did it justice, and I don't think it gets the hate that it deserves. Another 1990 movie that I actually just recently saw within the last year is Two Evil Eyes. It's Romero directs one segment and Dario Argento directs another, and they're both based off of Edgar Allan Poe stories. And it's Harvey Keitel. It's fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic, especially this segment with Harvey Keitel. So I would, if listeners
I've never seen it.
I would go watch it.
Oh yeah, that sounds cool. I mean, that's got to be that's a good lineup. Anything. There's. I mean, it's just I only picked the one movie from 91 mainly because it's like one of those you have to talk about. So I mean, either way, we keep like talking about these iconic performances, but one of the most iconic, I think, right up there is Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter.
Totally.
That all starts with 1991's Silence of the Lambs, dude. This movie it's another movie where it preys on the idea that like this shit happens in real life. You know what I mean? Like this, like there are people out there kidnapping other people, fucking, torturing them, doing whatever, killing them, whatever. And, what's interesting is that you're diving into not only are there the characters that are interesting, but you're diving into the process of finding one of these bad guys, right? Where it's, you're following.
It's fascinating.
Exactly. And, you have, Jodie Foster obviously also kind of gives a really iconic performance as Clarice.
Oh yeah.
And, there's commentary in this movie about, what probably at the time, probably what it was like, and probably still what it can be like for people, like for female officers, trying to navigate, promotion in what's mostly looked at what's in law enforcement, really, I guess.
Unfortunately, yeah,
and then
very sexist way of thinking, but yeah.
And so that's kind of an interesting kind of commentary early on in the movie. But then, as soon as you get introduced to Hannibal Lecter,
he's scene stealing.
The moment, the movie is going in a different direction for you as a viewer. After that, Buffalo Bill, the killer that Clarice is really trying to find, becomes almost of less interest. What I mean? Because you're just you're told this dude's like a fucking Hannibal the cannibal, he's kept in this cage at the back end of all the worst fucking people. And he's just so damn smart. And until you just have to and he knows it. That's the thing. He knows he's a fucked up individual, and he knows that you have to come to him for help and all this shit,
That's why it's such a fascinating concept. And it's something until I'd seen this movie, I'd never really seen before, but it I think part of this might've taken, some inspiration from, recently there was a series that came out called Mindhunter, based on the book, which is based off of how profiling came about and how they sort started profiling serial killers and how these back in the day they would work with serial killers, but to see it adapted like this, and like you mentioned, because a lot of serial killers are fucking geniuses, and that's how they get away with it for so long until they make a fatal error. But
yeah,
dude, the character of Hannibal Lecter, oh my god.
And you know what's interesting about it is that in terms of like how he becomes like a horror, like how he achieves that like kind of like horror movie status, is so wild because like it's almost, especially for Silence of the Lambs, it's almost like all reputation. Mm-hmm. Right, it's almost all, you get nothing but dialogue from Anthony Hopkins. You don't, the only action you see from him, because he's in a fucking cage, he's in a cell, he's tied up the majority of the movie, is that like one scene, where they just let him, and this is the danger of him, right? You just let him loose, he's alone for just long enough that, or he has that moment where you've forgotten to lock him up just enough. Mm-hmm. That he just slips through, and there's that shot of him when he just starts fucking biting that dude's face, that guard's face, and then like he's covered in blood from his like nose down, and you're just like, this is,
and then he just disembowels the one. Oh my god, dude,
it's fucking like, you nutty,
fucked
man.
Up now.
Yeah, and that's what I mean, where it's just like that moment where you're just like, dang, dude, bet you wish you didn't fuck that up.
This movie too, it's like, it was another one of those movies that has been parodied over and over and over. Yeah. Different scenes have been parodied, and that's when you have something successmovsuccessful.
Yeah, it's a great.
Not only that, but it obviously, it's based off a book, but it also spawned, a movie franchise with Red Dragon and Hannibal Rising to very different success. But correct me if I'm wrong, this is the first horror movie that won an Academy Award, right?
It did, yeah. It was the first one that ever won an Academy Award, which is huge.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah. Because it's like, what is it? I'm reading it was. Yeah, it is the only horror film to win Best Picture.
Jesus Christ!
Yeah, well deserved. But I really hope that like eventually somebody else will come along.
Yeah, I could see. Yeah. But this movie does too. It just have some gnarly like imagery too. Like obviously we talk about how it being parodied, but just those scenes of the U.S. senator's daughter that's kidnapped and she's in the well, and just like how disconnected from reality Buffalo Bill is.
My favorite parody of the well scene is in Joe Dirt.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
It puts the lotion on his skin, and he's like trying to do if he does it for an Auto Trader. Oh, yeah. Hey man, send me down that Auto Trader.
Dude, Joe Dirt is such a fucking. That's one of those movies where if I'm like having like a bad day or something, like I could just pop on Joe Dirt, and it just has so many good one-liners. And oh my God.
That movie cheers you the fuck up, dude. It's such a fucking good movie. Anyway, so that was a complete side note. Sorry about that, but
yeah, it's still wild to think that it's the first and only movie. Yeah, I hope that changes someday, because lately I feel like if there ever was a time, it would be now, with like how there's been so many like revered horror movies that have come out lately, like, from Ari Aster, and then obviously from Jordan Peele. So I feel like if there was ever a time for that to happen, it would be, in this era that we're in right now. I don't know.
I agree. Well,
so you have, what's up?
Oh, what were you going to say?
Well, because, you have the only pick for 91. Do you have any shout outs from 91 that you wanted to?
Just a couple like really random ones. We have to shout out Cape Fear with Robert De Niro. Just
great remake.
It's a Scorsese movie, and it does a really good job of kind of playing into that, like, like psycho dude that you just fucking crossed once, and now he's like latched onto you. It's a weird movie.
It's effective.
You mentioned Child's Play 3 that came out this year. 91. There was we did Popcorn. That's worth mentioning again. And I just wanted to shout out the other what was it? It was a Silent Night Deadly Night movie came out this year. It was number 5. It was the toy movie. Yeah.
Oh my god.
Chef's kiss to that movie. Mwah.
That movie is a chef's kiss, dude. That movie is amazing.
Yeah.
This is another year where we got like a fair amount of sequels. So, I've gone on record where Omen is one of my favorite horror movies. It's one of those movies that has stuck with me for so long, but I'm not really a fan of its sequels. So Omen 4 came out in 91. Puppet Master 3. Ghoulies 3, which is the weakest one. Also we have Freddy's Dead 6, The Final Nightmare. Alligator 2, which the first Alligator is a really solid horror movie. The second one is kind of like a campier, more ridiculous sequel. So there's an interesting movie that came out in 91. Later in the 90s, there's a movie that came out called Campfire Tales, which has James Marsden in it. And it's about a group of kids that their car breaks down and they tell stories around the campfire. But there was also a movie that came out in 91 called Campfire Tales, which is super low budget, but it has Gunnar Hansen that played Leatherface in it. So it's interesting. Okay. The segments really aren't that strong. There's just one really weird segment about these two kids, these two stoners that stumble across this weed that they smoke that they start deteriorating when they smoke. It's kind of a weak anthology movie. Probably one of my lesser favorite, but still a solid Wes Craven movie came out this year, People Under the Stairs.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I think it's an interesting concept. And then the last one I wanted to shout out for 91 was Dolly Dearest, which I feel like at some point we're going to have to do an episode on that movie because it's just ridiculous. So yeah, I just, obviously Wes Craven, is a horror icon, rightfully so. And I think People Under the Stairs was an interesting idea. It's just not my favorite. So
yeah, I think it's just always like what it's any like Wes Craven movies usually got some merit to it. But yeah, what about what about 1992? I know we have a few movies set aside for that year.
Yeah, and so 1992, had some there's a couple of shout outs I want to do that I just want to do one real quick. That's a sequel that gets a lot of hate, and it's Alien 3. And I feel like it's one of those movies that had so many things, like it had different directors attached to it. It had different stories attached to it before David Fincher came along and directed it, and it gets a lot of hate. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that in Aliens, there's a shitload of aliens, and then Alien 3 goes back to it with only one alien in it. So I think that, I don't know. And just the setting.
Well, like the franchise takes its like wild turns, right? So like the first one is like a horror movie. The second one's like an action movie, or like a sci-fi action movie. And the third one, they tried, like you said, they try to recapture that like kind of claustrophobic horror feel. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't have the same effect, probably because in Aliens, they went so big. Big. You saw a fucking alien queen at the end of that goddamn movie. You know what I mean? And it also takes place, in like on like a prison planet in Alien 3,
Yeah.
and so it doesn't necessarily have that same claustrophobic feel, I think, that the ship environment
Of course.
did, but there are some cool elements to this movie. I do think that there's like, yeah, you said it best. There's some unnecessary hate on this movie. It's the weakest out of the original 3, if you ask me.
Well, yeah.
It's definitely not any worse though than Alien Resurrection. So
I completely agree.
That's kind of the thing, right? So it's like, but in this movie, in Aliens 3, we don't have to dwell on it too long, but it's like the face hugger, the xenomorph that it gets like, well, like the face hugger like impregnates or whatever, like a dog or something like that in this one, and so it has all these like canine features where it's
Cool
running
as
around
hell.
on all fours more and stuff like that. Yeah, it really is kind of cool. I think it's just like they went really hard with the CGI for that alien, and I think that's also one of the things that worked against
Okay.
it. You should have stuck with like more practical, I think, but
Okay.
whatever.
So-
anyway, what else we got?
But the next movie that I wanted to talk about in some depth, and it's for me, it's another nostalgia movie, and it's another movie that I used to always watch. It was like a comfort movie, and I know, and I'm not the only one. I mean, sorry, and I know that most people prefer the Joss Whedon television show more so than the movie. If you ask most people, they're more so a fan of the television adaptation. But I love Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the movie, which was written by Joss Whedon, but didn't really take the tone that he had wanted. Like he's very vocal about not being happy with how the movie, the end product. But I think it's a fantastic movie because, it's got this wild, like Valley Girl setting, what I mean? But there's some great horror elements in it. It actually has, it's one of my favorite vampire movies, but it has one of my favorite shots of any vampire movie where Lothos, Rutger Hauer's character, the main vampire, there's this scene where he's floating high up in the air and descending, and it's an amazing shot.
Hell
And
yeah.
it's stuck with me to this day. But there's just so many aspects of this movie that I love because just the cast too, Christy Swanson, Donald Sutherland, Paul Rubens, Rutger Hauer, Hilary Swank, Luke Perry, David Arquette, and even Seth Green and Thomas Jane have small, like that's
So that's a pretty impressive cast list, honestly.
yeah.
Yeah, no, it's solid. Like I like both. I like both the series and the movie, but the movie does hit differently. Like,
Totally.
you know what I mean? Yeah, I don't know, man. I feel like that was, it's when was the last time I fucking watched it? It was like, I think I watched it like a year ago, maybe, but like,
Okay.
but yeah, I don't know.
It's been far too long since I've seen it, unfortunately.
I mean, it's still just as fun though. Like that's the thing about it. I wouldn't say I get too spooked by it, but it has. But like you said, it has all those elements of like it has like a creature element, and it has the suspense element, But you have it all wrapped in this, and this is kind of the fun thing about it. This like really disarming setting, where it's like sunny California, everything's fucking great here. Like,
Exactly.
how could like it's Buffy's a fucking cheerleader on the squad, and yet and that's the brilliant turn is that like but she'll fucking put a stake through your goddamn vampire heart if she needs to. Yeah, it's super cool, man. It's super cool.
She also has, and this is something that I feel like I noticed more as I got older, but she has just this such great character arc too, where she starts out, as I mentioned, as this like really shallow, frankly annoying Valley Girl, where all she cares about is shopping and her boyfriend and hanging out with her friends.
Yeah.
And she's, thrust into this role where, Merrick, Donald Sutherland's character, comes along and basically explains that she's to be the next Slayer. It's one of those situations where this person didn't choose for this to happen, but they just got all this responsibility, kind of like a Spider-Man type of deal, where they got all this responsibility thrust on them. And due to that, she changes, and it helps her grow up and become a better person, to where there's even that part later in the movie where she realizes sort of like how shallow and annoying and immature her friends and like everything that she thought about life was. That's a really cool aspect of it too. And there's just some great visuals. I really love, it's kind of hard sometimes to disconnect art from, a person. Paul Rubens, he obviously has, he's very aware that, at one point he got caught masturbating in public or whatever.
You're talking about him jerking off in the porn theater or whatever?
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
But
still, though, you can't take away how fucking awesome some of Paul Rubens' characters have been.
Especially this one, especially after he gets his arm ripped off. There's just some great scenes that happen in this movie. It's a lot of it is more played for comedy, which is what I'm talking about, where Joss Whedon kind of wanted it a little darker, to where if and that's how the show was. You know what I mean? It still had those elements of, this is a high school setting, and these are the hijinks that happen in high school, but it was definitely a lot darker. But I never really got into the show, so I associate more with the movie, and I've always been a big fan of the movie adaptation. And not only that too, because it was something, it was a creative new thing that was a new, it wasn't like based on a previous God damn it, what's the word I'm looking for?
It was an original piece of work, really.
Thank you. Yes. And it was very unique and original. And it was also one of those movies that is obviously it's very much a product of its time. The characters are hanging out in malls, it's a very 90s movie. That's what I like about it. It reminds me of a simpler time, I was born in 87, so it reminds me, the 90s were a simpler time. I was a kid. I didn't have any cares in the world. And so anytime I watch this movie, I think part of it, it transports me back to that time. And that's another big reason why I like it so much, is it transports me to that time where, things were simpler and I didn't have all these, traumatic things that happened. You know what I mean? So I think that's part of another big reason why I'm such an advocate for it.
Hell yeah.
Because it's one of my absolute favorite vampire movies. And I know, when you ask people their favorite vampire movies, they're probably more prone to say, The Lost Boys, which is one of mine too, or Interview with the Vampire. So purely nostalgia.
Hey, it counts though, man.
Yeah.
What are do you have any shout outs? I have a couple of shout outs for 1992.
Go for it.
One of them obviously has to be Army of Darkness, Sam Raimi's third movie in the line. But Army of Darkness is just like it's in a way it's like Alien to Aliens, where it just becomes like this bigger movie. There's more action that happens. There's more funny things that it's just a fucking great movie. It's a great ride. Ash is obviously back and so you gotta love it. You also have where was it? There was a Hellraiser 3 came out this in 1992. Hell on Earth.
There's some great the thing I like about, because obviously Hellraiser is a classic and Hellraiser 2 is really good too, and Hellraiser 3 is kind of where it started to go off the rails. But there's some awesome Cenobites in this movie, especially the one where it emits the CDs.
Oh, yeah.
Dude, That is one of the coolest fucking visuals, is that club scene where it's just like spitting out all these CDs and they're just like flying into people. Oh my God, it's beautiful.
So redong. And then I just had it. There's one more that I wanted to mention. Where was it? It was another fucking sequel. Pet Cemetery 2.
Yeah.
With Eddie Furlong, man. Like that movie.
I think it's another one of those movies that, like, and again, it's directed by Mary Lambert, who directed the first. Mm-hmm. And so I can kind of understand why this movie gets some of the hate it does, because it was kind of like, obviously there wasn't, Stephen King didn't write a Pet Cemetery 2. So people kind of felt like it was kind of just random that there's a sequel. And it obviously isn't as strong as the first one, but it's another guilty pleasure. Like, I enjoy so many parts of this movie.
Hell yeah. Well, it's just a really random follow up, but it does make sense that you could, follow it up with like kind of more stories set in that setting. You know what I mean? Yeah. Not necessarily following those characters from the first one or anything like that, but yeah.
92 also gave us Peter Jackson's Brain Dead or Dead Alive, depending on what region you're living in. It's still wild to me. I know we've mentioned this a couple times, but how when most people think of Peter Jackson, they just think about Lord of the Rings. Like, they have no idea like where he came from and how he started, just in making these wild ass movies in New Zealand. You know what I mean?
That's what I mean, man. Like, dude's got a bloody history.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then before we get into the last two movies that I know we have set aside, I also want to shout out, we talked about vampire movies. The 1992 Bram Stoker's Dracula starring Gary Oldman came out.
Oh, man.
And that is one of those movies that, you mentioned people, kind of like have a handful of vampire movies off the top of their head that they would pick as their favorite. This is one of those movies also. Yes. I think this is like right up there with those, where it's Absolutely. Like, the performances that you get from everybody involved are so interesting and that it works, really well. But
especially Gary Oldman.
Oh yeah.
My God.
Oh yeah.
The setting, the imagery. It's such a beautifully dark movie.
Definitely.
Yeah. So what is your I know what your last pick is, but what is your last pick?
My final pick for this set is 1992's Candyman. It's a movie we've talked about. We've talked about one of the sequels in a regular episode, but Candyman is another. It's a staple horror series. Like,
absolutely.
You know what I mean? It takes things that you haven't necessarily addressed in horror and starts to address them. Talks about like the vengeful spirit is vengeful for a reason, and it's because he was accused of infidelity, basically sleeping as a slave, sleeping with the master's fucking wife or whatever.
Totally.
And is tortured, is killed, all this shit,
brutally tortured and
killed. And so it's really great that it doesn't, like, this movie plays on this idea of like the spirit not having rest, not being able to, and just being vengeful, really, and kind of coming back to let's just say deal with people. I mean, like the character of Candyman is, though scary and supernatural in itself, is also sympathetic, which is
100%.
Which is what's crazy about it. I don't agree with his methods about finding new love necessarily, but it's a sympathetic character because his life was taken away from him in such a fucking brutal way. So
absolutely, one of my favorite aspects of this movie too is I'm a sucker for urban legends.
Oh God, yeah,
and myths and stuff like that. And it's obviously loosely associated with the Bloody Mary myth. Stand in the mirror and say Bloody Mary 3 times. Obviously with this, it's if you stand in the mirror and say Candyman 5 times, you're going to summon them. But that's just a basic concept like that. It has these urban legendy, links to it, and then it evolves into this full blown, amazing story. And another thing about this movie too that I know gets talked about is how it's one of the first really great black characters in horror.
Yeah, exactly. Tony Todd is like just as much of a staple as as Kane Hodder playing Jason, as oh my God, why am I blanking on his fucking name? We just talked about him. Gunnar Hansen playing Leatherface. Except that in some of these in Tony Todd's case, they build more on the character rather than just the killer, which is what's really cool and really intriguing and different about the Candyman character. So
and just the setting of the difference between social classes, and this is happening at the Cabrini Green, which is obviously this lower class, predominantly black apartment. Thank you. That's exactly what it is. Of this project, and that part of the movie that they talk about in the movie is that no one really cares about these characters because of that, because they're black, because they're lower class. So it's a lot of good social commentary that's in the movie.
Yeah. I agree. It's a fucking great movie. I mean, I'm assuming if you're listening to this podcast about horror movies, you probably watched it. But if not, you should for sure make sure you digest the original Candyman.
Just some of those visuals, like obviously that scene near the end where he opens up his chest and his rib cage opens up, and the fucking
and all those bees.
It still gets to me. And this is another amazing thing about it too, is that it was the practical effects age still. So those are real fucking bees that he had in his body and in his mouth, and he went through that to film this piece of art. And god damn. And
wasn't there a rumor or a story that didn't he get paid per bee sting?
Yes. Yeah, I would have done the same thing. That's fair.
Yeah, fuck yeah.
And obviously, Candyman 2 and Candyman 3 are really lackluster, but I think I feel like recently, the reboot is just such an amazing movie because it builds on this lore from the first one, but also establishes its own new lore, and just that ending, oh my God, that the newer Candyman, if people haven't seen it, I think it's a fucking modern masterpiece. It is such a good movie.
Hell yeah.
And I just think that in whole, that Candyman deserves more respect than it gets. It's not just your typical slasher fare. There's a lot more, themes and elements to it. So it's just another one of those that I really heavily recommend.
Hell yeah. I agree. What's your final pick for 1992?
So real quick before I jump, I just want to do a couple more last shout outs for 1992. We have a Full Moon features Demonic Toys, which is just ridiculous and spawned its own low budget, outrageous franchise. Children of the Corn 2 is a pretty solid sequel.
Oh yeah.
We also have Dr. Giggles, which I love Larry Drake. he was in a couple episodes of Tales from the Crypt that are fantastic. He's in this. He plays the main antagonist in the first two Darkman movies.
Larry that's Drake, fucking right.
Larry Drake is amazing. And then the last movie I want to shout out from 92 is, and I don't think it's as strong as the series, but Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me.
Definitely. I was thinking about that too. It's worth shouting out for sure.
Yeah. I feel like they were maybe like a little too ambitious with it and kind of swung for the fences, and it just wasn't the home run that they were hoping for. Because that just, unfortunately, I still haven't seen, and I still need to see the more recent series.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to see it yet either, because it was on like Showtime or something like that. And I was like, man, I'm not paying for Showtime just for that. But I need to get my paws on. The original Twin Peaks is so great though.
Oh my God.
So much about it is so fucking great. I cannot say that enough. Like if you haven't ever dug into it, you need to.
Yeah, man. It just, there's just something about it where parts of it are just so weird and so like dreamlike. There's just so many different elements to it. Like you can't, like, nothing you're gonna say about it is gonna do it justice, because it's just that. Agreed. It's amazing. People need to watch it. Agreed. But the last pick I want to talk about, and we mentioned that we're kind of a little Stephen King heavy, and this is obviously okay. So he directed. He only directed one movie, which I love, called Maximum Overdrive. And that movie is heavily panned. And that's fine, rightfully so. It's just the concept itself is kind of out there. But another one of his movies that he's associated with that gets a lot of hate is Sleepwalkers. This wasn't based on a previous work. He specifically wrote this screenplay for this movie, and it was directed by Mick Garris, who really didn't necessarily direct a lot, but is still a very respected person in the horror community. And he went on to create Masters of Horror, and there's just this movie, like, it's just such a wild ass concept about these two like vampiric shapeshifter like creatures. They're essentially, they're in human form, but they can also take the form of like bipedal, like werewolf creatures essentially. And they have powers. There's scenes in the movie where the character Charles, he makes his car change from a red car to a blue car, and they have powers where they can become invisible. They have telekinesis.
That's cool.
But their weakness is cats, and there's just, there's a lot of good. Ron Perlman's in it. We just talked about Twin Peaks, and Madchen Amick is in it. I probably pronounced her name terribly wrong, but she's in it. And then there's also a bunch of there's a Stephen King cameo, but there's also some kind of like blink and you miss it cameos and listen to these names. So John Landis, Toby Hooper, and Joe Dante all have like little bit parts as like lab tech, lab assistant. Yeah.
That's crazy, man. That's super cool. Like, but that's like the credit, the weight that like Stephen King brings to something. Like he's involved in it, like all these other like people who've been like making horror movies, staples, and all these things. They definitely, they want to be a part of that project, because that's just like, I don't know. I mean, that's just super cool though. But yeah, like I imagine like what fun.
There's just some crazy scenes in this movie. Like there's a scene where there's this cop, this character that's a cop that has a pet cat called Clovis that he brings with him everywhere. And there's this scene where he is chasing Charles, his character, and they're right up next to him, and the cat sees Charles, and Charles' face like really quickly changes from his face to a baby's face to the werecat's face. It's great. There's also a death scene involving a corn on the cob, which is pretty spectacular. It's just a wild out there. I love it. It's one of my biggest guilty pleasures. I don't care whatever hate it gets. I will recommend this movie to anybody just for the wild fucking plot and the wild elements. It's very, very much King-like.
Hell yeah.
And I think that's one of the great parts about it. You know, you can tell for better or for worse, you can tell Stephen King had a hand in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Fuck yeah.
But even with someone like him, you know what I mean? Not everything that you write or attach to is going to be a hit. You're going to have your misses, and that's totally fine.
Fair. It is fine. But the especially somebody like King, the hits are so many, and when they hit, they fucking hit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Hell yeah. Any other like final like shout outs or anything like that last minute popping into your head?
Not really that I can think of. There were some interesting, apparently in 1990, there was Tobe Hooper. It was a TV movie called I'm Dangerous Tonight, and it had Anthony Perkins in it. And it sounds kind of interesting. There's also kind of probably like, obviously judging by the title, it was more of like a low budget. And it wasn't like a Roger Corman or a Charles Band movie, but it's definitely in that vein, called I Bought a Vampire Motorcycle, which sounds really interesting.
That does sound hella interesting. I wonder what a vampire motorcycle is like.
But yeah, I just, I know that it's crazy because, we just talked about a bunch of pretty solid 90s movies in this. And I know that as the 90s goes on, like, horror wasn't in the best place. And, when we get to the later episodes, we're obviously going to talk about Scream and how it came along and totally revitalized the genre. But it's just wild for me to think that when there's all these good movies that we just mentioned that came out in the early 90s. So, yeah,
I agree. It's sometimes I think about the 90s as like this a little bit of a pit, but then you remember that like there were some really like solid things that just I think got overshadowed by like the bigger studio attempts to make that like like other horror, like like there's some really big flops along the way that like I think kind of tainted the horror pool during this decade a little bit until some better things came along. But like we noted during this episode, you have movies like Silence of the Lambs, which is the only horror movie that has ever won a fucking Best Picture award. Like that came out in the 90s, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like shit like that. So yeah. Well, hell yeah, man. We'll leave this episode off here. We will be doing another follow-up because we've mentioned it before. We're gonna do another kind of regular movie episode for the next one, but then we'll follow back up with the next three years out of the 90s, where we'll pick apart a few more. But
totally.
Keep coming back for more, and we'll keep recording them. In the meantime, make sure you dip yourself into that old Heart Radio corn batter and turn yourself into a corn dog, you filthy little hot dogs.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Oh my God. All right. Any last words on your end, my friend?
No, I know I say it all the time, but just go watch some horror.
I think that's a great way to end it. You heard the man.